Okay, today's video is all about new releases and what I think about them. There's fragrances here that you guys want to find out about, and I'm going to let you know if you should go check them out or if you skip them. So find out about these 12 new fragrances coming right up. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Sebastian. Yes, today we're talking about 12 new fragrances on the market and what I think about them, and if you should rush out to get your nose on them or to skip them. So basically what I'm going to let you know is if I like them, if I don't like them, what they smell like, how they perform, and all that good stuff. There's always new fragrances coming out. These are ones that I have in my collection. There might be some missing, I just don't have them. But it's a great way to find out what I think about fragrances and if you should go rush out to smell them in one video. So why don't we go ahead and get started with the first fragrance. We're talking about a new one from the house of JOVOY. I've been waiting for this one for quite some time. This is MUSC PALLAS. This one right here from JOVOY. First thing I should say is this is a musk and it's close to the skin. It's not like their beast mode fragrances like Psychedelic or Incident Diplomatique. It's also not like a gourmand like Remember Me or the Powerhouse private label. This to me is a very personal fragrance. It's focusing on musky notes with some light citruses and of course a bit of fruitiness and some powdery touches as well. This is going to satisfy the folks that like the close to the skin fragrances, the musky fragrances, the sexy fragrances, but it's not going to satisfy the folks that want beast mode. This is not that, but if you love musk, if you love personal fragrances, if you like calming, cozy fragrances, and if you just, you know, something that will actually attract someone to come and, you know, ask you what you're smelling, because in the end, someone has to get close to you to smell you, so, and then they'll smell something very, very pleasant. If you're into musks, I do recommend this one. If you're into personal scents, I do recommend it. If you're into beast mode, I think you should totally skip JOVOY's MUSC PALLAS because it's going to be very, very faint on you. So moving on to the house of ELECTIMUSS London, this is Gladiator Oud, this one right here. So ELECTIMUSS London does do fragrances that are overwhelming beast mode. So they're the complete opposite of this particular fragrance from JOVOY. Really, really loud fragrances. Here we have a new perfume from the perfumer Julien Rasquinet. It's focusing on oud, and I think, well, not I think, I know for a fact that the last fragrance Julien Rasquinet did for ELECTIMUSS London, it wasn't really my favorite fragrance. It was the Vichy leather. Here we have something that's really, really interesting and wearable that I quite enjoy. It's an oud, but this oud is definitely top-notch oud, really, really wearable, really sexy, really strong, really intense, and it's got this sweaty muskiness in there as well. So I think some people might say this might remind them a little bit of the Moon from Frederic Malle, same perfumer, two different brands. Yes and no. I think the fruits are minuscule here in ELECTIMUSS London's Gladiator Oud, whereas in the Moon there's a, you know, an overdose of fruits in there. And also I feel like Cumin here was present in the Moon. It's more amplified in here. So they're different, but it'll remind you of one another. Plus, I think this particular fragrance is a lot less expensive than the Moon. So if you're liking the idea of the Moon, but with the fact that there's no or hardly any fruity presence and the overdose of cumin, then I think you should get your nose on this one. And I definitely think it's a solid release from this house. And you should go, you know, wear it. I think it performs really, really great. It's loud and intense and very, very long lasting. And, you know, coming from an awesome perfumer like Julien Rasquinet, I do recommend Gladiator Oud. So that is definitely one for you to try. Then moving on to a designer, Tom Ford, Soleil de Faux. I know somebody corrected me recently. I'm doing my best with French. I'm sorry if it bothers you if you're a native French speaker. So this is the fourth in the Soleil series of fragrances from Tom Ford. and I think it's a pretty solid job here, definitely very wearable. So very creamy, calming fragrance. It's got lots of sandalwood here, and then of course it's meshed with the tuberose and some sweet resinous touch, which creates the ambery effect here in this fragrance with the benzoin. Those are all the notes that they credit for this one, and I think it's a pretty good job. I wouldn't say this is like, oh my god, the best smelling fragrance I've smelled, but I'm enjoying this particular fragrance. I like to wear it. It does have a little bit of a beachy reminder, but more in a woody ambery way, because you know some of the other fragrances in this series do have a kind of a beachy vibe, whereas this is totally different. But then yeah, I get some reminders of some of the other fragrances. But for me, tuberose kind of has a milky quality. Sandalwood has kind of a milky quality. Two together is a very creamy fragrance. There's a bit of nuttiness in there as well. For some reason, I get that. But then you've got the resinous ambery touches, vanillic touches of the benzoin, all for a nicely pleasant fragrance. It might lean a bit feminine, and I also don't think this is the most amazing performance for a fragrance, but it's pretty solid. It's very moderate, I would say. Not beast mode or anything, but also not a wimp, if that makes sense. So this is Tom Ford Soleil de Faux. All right, moving on to another designer. This is a new fragrance from Hermes. This is Un Jardin à CYTHERE, this one right here. This particular fragrance, you know, I've been wearing it, but when I bought this fragrance, I got a bunch of samples, so I've been wearing the samples. So my bottle is fairly untouched here. But I smelled this in Europe and instantly loved it, and I keep saying it's the year of the pistachio. If you haven't caught my video with Mona Katan recently, she just launched a pistachio fragrance. She came to the studio and that's what I told her. And this is another pistachio fragrance. It's got pistachio in it, so it's got a nuttiness, a bit of a green vibe, and then it's got the olive wood. It's definitely nutty and creamy at the same time. And then there is something dry and grassy note in here, something like dry grass or something like that that's in here. You get it contrasted with a pistachio and the olive wood. I think it's a pretty good fragrance. It's kind of gourmand leaning, totally different from all the other Jardin fragrances. I quite like it. I really enjoy the collection, actually. I like the fact that with these fragrances, with the Un Jardin collection of fragrances, you get to travel to different gardens throughout the world. And with this one, Un Jardin à CYTHERE, it's a Greek island, I believe, from what I remember when I did my initial video. And it makes sense, you know, olives and pistachios kind of coming from the Mediterranean. So they kind of go into this direction of it being nutty and woody and dry, grassy, and things like that. So definitely worth it, but I think it's a bit unusual for this collection, so be warned, I would say. But if you're into the idea of pistachio, definitely check it out. It's an eau de toilette. I get pretty good longevity with that one. It's got decent performance. I wouldn't say it's a screamer. It wears pretty close to the skin after, you know, the initial spray and the development of the fragrance. It's pretty close because it's an eau de toilette, but it lingers on quite a bit, very, very close to the skin. So it's a designer, it's an eau de toilette. You're going to kind of come to expect things like that with that particular fragrance. So next up, another fragrance that I think is pretty solid here is Serge Lutens ECRIN de FUMEE, this one right here. This one I actually featured in a video of upcoming fragrances. When I first heard about it, I really got excited about it, and it does not disappoint. It's a great fragrance, and I think if you're a fan of Serge Lutens fragrances, you're probably going to like this one, but there is the fact that there's smoke in here, and smoke is not a traditional note that people like to wear, where here I think it's pretty nicely done. I think that smoke really does, you know, great job with the tobacco in here. There's cacao, there's rum, and then there's woodsy notes. So the smoke kind of adds this kind of smokiness to the tobacco note. So for me, I feel like this is a great new tobacco fragrance from Serge Lutens because of course they have Chergui. And I'm actually preferring this one a little more than Chergui. I've worn Chergui so much. It was one of the first fragrances I ever bought when I started doing reviews here like 11 years ago. But for me, it's a nice tobacco fragrance, a bit boozy gourmand, of course boozy, kind of a liqueur, you know, type note in here, and very, very woody. So it wears perfectly for me, but I think the only thing that's going to bother people about this is probably that smoke note. It's not a traditional note, and most people that are used to wearing traditional notes, smoke is not something that I think is an exciting note for people. But then if you like this kind of an idea, definitely wear it. One other thing I should say, Serge Lutens, I always say this, has great smelling fragrances, really, really clever, really, really unique scents. I just find their fragrances a bit not so loud. But I love the house. It's not a house I turn to for beast mode, if I should say. It's not, but I turn to them because they have some of the most unique fragrances, which I really, really enjoy. And I think ECRIN de FUMEE is definitely a pretty solid release from the house that you should check out. Again, it's probably going to be a bit tough to get because they're not distributed in the States, so you might have to order samples from somewhere. I don't know where, but I love that fragrance. Really, really do. Okay, moving on to a couple of houses with 2 fragrances each, or maybe 3 houses. The first one I'm going to talk to you about is Maison CRIVELLI's latest Neroli NASIMBA. So I'm a big fan of Neroli, being from the Mediterranean. I love the smell of the orange blossom, Neroli, you know, the citrus trees and things like that. Here, the fragrance is that, but then it goes into a different direction where it becomes more complex and doesn't stay fresh. So it's a kind of a Neroli fragrance where it develops to be stronger and stronger, as in the notes they're using, not as in getting beast mode and beast mode, because in the end, it's definitely a fresh floral, citrus floral fragrance, or white floral fragrance, I should say, but it dries down to a leather, and the leather in here is kind of a unique leather in that it has a bit of a rubbery, you know, vinyl-y kind of a leathery smell to it, which is a kind of a nice, maybe I shouldn't say plastic, more like shower curtain vinyl-y, but more along the line of leather, shower curtain, pleather, you know, vinyl kind of a thing together. So it's a very unique fragrance in that it develops into that, where you start out with very fresh, very citrusy, very refreshing with the neroli and the orange blossom. It's the same flower, different extractions to create the different names. Neroli, orange blossom, basically comes from the orange blossom. And then they've also got the petitgrain note in here, which is from the same tree, the bitter orange tree. So you've got all this beautiful kind of a citrusy, floral, green, earthy, bitter, leafy kind of notes in here. And then of course it becomes this kind of like a leathery fragrance along the way with woods, spices, and there's definitely some ambery touches as well. I think this is a great fragrance. I wouldn't say this would replace Iris Mollicon, because I really do love Iris Mollicon, but this could be up there pretty high as long as the clear bottles go. I'm not talking about the extracts, but this could be like 2 or 3 favorite in the white bottle fragrance, or the clear bottle fragrances, I should say. Iris Mollicon still is my favorite. This might be 2 or 3, as I said. So this is Neroli NASIMBA. Check that out if you don't know it. And this fragrance, I think it's exclusive still right now, but it should be making a rollout all over the world. I think wherever Maison CRIVELLI fragrances are sold, but this is Oud Maracuja. So this is, I believe, Portuguese for passion fruit. I believe that's what maracuja is. And again, it's a fruity take on oud. I think it's also kind of a mass oud. I should say more like Western oud, not a mass oud. So definitely on the niche side, but it's the fusion of oudy, woody notes with passion fruit and floral notes like rose. And it's also very strong and concentrated. There's a bit of ambery touch in here with benzoin and labdanum, and there's also earthy patchouli. So I think it's a really great fragrance, very long lasting, very, very intense. Not as strong as the patchouli magnetic in this collection. And again, now we have a blue bottle color, as you can see, not the reddish color, but it smells fantastic and it's definitely wearable. This fragrance, unlike Neroli NASIMBA, again, I didn't mention you might be a little put off with this Neroli NASIMBA, is because if you're expecting it to stay fresh all the way, and then you get the leather woods amber thing when it's drying down, you might be disappointed, because some of you I know don't like leather fragrances, but if you like the idea of starting fresh and getting deeper and darker, I think the Neroli NASIMBA is great. And then with the fact that with the Oud Maracuja, I think might be a little too intense, not like any, you know, like fruity notes and things like that, and maybe you don't even care for oud, but it's a very Western oud, very wearable, not animalic, fruity, floral, earthy, ambery. I think it's a pretty nice release here, Oud Maracuja from Maison CRIVELLI. Moving on to another smoky fragrance, going back to a designer. This is Cartier's Pacha de Cartier Noir Absolu. This one, actually, the more I have it, the more disappointing it's becoming. I don't hate it as much. It's definitely not the original Pacha, which is my #2 favorite in the collection. And then it's not the Pacha de Parfum, the one that came before this, which is my #1 in the collection. This is more like #3. It's burnt wood with caramelized sugar, which is kind of an acquired taste. It's smoky and also not necessarily gourmand if you're going to expect kind of a gourmand thing with this one. It's more like a fougere apparently, because the original in the series is a fougere. Even the Parfum, the one that came out before this, was actually a more like a warm amber fougere. Here it's just so different and not, to me, not wearing like a fougere, that I'm not really certain how this fragrance is going to be received by folks that are more into wearing conventional fragrances. It's lots of smoke. It's lots of caramelized smokiness, because caramel, when you're burning, you know, when you're caramelizing sugar, it gets smoky as well. So it's an overdose of smoke, but under there you can kind of get some aromatics and things like that. Maybe a little trace of lavender is in there to give you that kind of fougere-like effect. But I think that even though they've got a beautiful, very, very sexy bottle, I think this is not going to be as popular as the last release in the collection. I don't know. What do you guys think about it? I think you use caution. Don't blind buy. It's very smoky, burnt wood, obviously. So check it out and see what you guys think. It's a Pacha de Cartier Noir Absolu. I don't know what to think, but I recently retested their vanilla fragrance in the Oud collection, and I think that one is actually growing on me, and maybe this one will grow on me as well, but I don't know. It needs some balancing act there. Maybe the caramelized sugar should have been a little stronger, because the burnt wood kind of dominates and not a lot comes through, other than the fact that there's you know, some stuff under there that's trying to come through, but they don't. Okay, so I've got two Nishane fragrances I'm going to report to you about recently from Essence. This is Oolong Cha and this is Ani X. Well, Oolong Cha X and Ani X. So I wasn't able to sample all of the X series fragrances. I sampled Hachivat X, Ani X, and Oolong Cha X. I only can report to you on the Ani X and Oolong Cha X. What I remember from Hachivat is that it was definitely a little more pleasant, not as, it wasn't as screechy, hard, and very kind of woody as the original is, but I'll have to sample that later and let you know about it. But let's talk about Ani X first, this one right here. So Ani is a very popular fragrance from Nishane, probably their second or third most popular fragrance after Hachivat. Ani is definitely a sandalwood fragrance with lots of vanilla and also ginger and cardamom. Here, I feel like it seems pretty close to the original, but it might have a bit of a freshness around it. So I think if you like the idea of Ani, but you felt it was too intense, this is probably one for you to try. But when I was testing it out here after the event, I noticed that it's still pretty strong. It doesn't have a lot of freshness. So I've got to put this to use, but I feel like if you already have the original, you're happy with it, and you like its performance and things like that, this might be a bit redundant for you. But if you're looking for something a little more fresh and things like that, definitely check it out. And also, if you're a fan of Nishane, you should definitely check it out as well. You might be really into Ani, and then you think Ani X is even better after you smell it. But I say check it out, but it might be redundant to have. And then we've got Oolong Cha. So Ani is it's Cecile Zarokian. She redid it, and then Oolong Cha was created by a perfumer I don't know, but Oolong Cha X was redone by Julien Rascanet, and I think he did a great job here. He's amplified it with Magnolia, so it's got a bit of a floral touch, a little more freshness, although the original to me was pretty fresh, and I haven't compared them side by side. I also have not compared Ani X side by side with Ani, so I'll have to do that later and report back separately. But for me, I felt like the Magnolia note here was really beautiful, and it created a bit of a creamy floral white touch, floral touch in here that I quite like. I really like Oolong Cha a lot. It's one of my favorites, probably a top 5. And I think here with the Oolong Cha X, Julien Rascanet did great by adding that kind of creamy, very, very fresh magnolia note. And magnolia is a white flower. It's not one of those really intense white flowers like if you compare it to something like tuberose or jasmine or even gardenia. It's not going to have that really strong floral smell. To me, magnolia has a bit of a lemoniness in there, and I think it really contributes beautifully here with the addition of the original fragrance. So I think Oolong Cha X is nice. Again, it might also still be redundant for you if you already have Oolong Cha. Test it out, buy samples or sample in the store to see what you think. But again, if you're a fan, you might really be into this and you might want to have both of them. So anyway, those are my thoughts on these two new fragrances from Nishane. And as soon as I get my nose on the remainder of the new X collection from Nishane, I'll report back here on the channel, so stay tuned. But let's move on to two new fragrances from Xerjoff. The first of which is Aridal, this one right here, which was a bit of a disappointment for me. I was expecting a little something else in this one and I didn't get it. But if you like the idea of LME, sandalwood, patchouli with powdery orris and, you know, other woodsy notes and musky notes and flowers and things like that, you might dig this one. And I feel like lately I have not been digging cypriol or papyrus. I don't know what it is. My mood has changed from enjoying these notes, and this particular fragrance, Aridal, has a pretty prominent papyrus note, and to me papyrus and cypriol kind of have similar smelling qualities, so maybe that's what's causing me to not enjoy this particular fragrance. I feel like it needed something to help it along a little bit, so it felt a little boring, but you guys might be into it. But this is Aridal from Xerjoff. Again, I don't know your taste. You should definitely sample if you're a fan of Xerjoff. For me, that one's not doing it. But on the other hand, Astaral is a really, really great fragrance from Xerjoff with a most gorgeous bottle as well. This fragrance I really enjoy, I really like. It's not anything new that I haven't smelled before. I think Xerjoff does fragrances like this a lot, but they've done a great job with this one. It features moss, it features rose, it features oud, labdanum, absolute, shamama accord, amberwood, violet, anise, and amber. This one actually, it's one of those kind of oud rose kind of a take on a fragrance. Very intense, very long lasting, not so jammy, a bit on the dry side. Wears beautifully, it has great longevity, really intense for a fragrance. And again, I'll say it again, this bottle is beautiful. And the cap, I think they've done a great job, this cap. So this is a fragrance, well, there was a collection of fragrances from Xerjoff called Chemi, which got rebranded and moved into their regular collection and relaunched all at the same time. So if you're thinking that Xerjoff has launched a ton of new fragrances, they didn't. They just moved over the Chemi over, and I believe this particular fragrance is brand new. I could be wrong. I think this is a brand new release that's in the, you know, similar to the Chemi collection. So if you're liking the idea of Astaral and you like the way it sounds and things like that, I would say check it out. I feel like between the two, for me, it's also a better value of this one. This Aridal seems a little expensive, and again, it didn't wow me. It didn't really do it for me. I just felt like it needed something, and it wasn't, you know, developing into something that I like to wear. But Astaral, on the other hand, smells fantastic. I really like it. Also, it's really intense. I think Aridal is also very intense. It's just I wasn't really wowed or excited about it, but check that out if you like the idea of it. And that's pretty much it for today's video. If you have any questions or comments about these fragrances, let me know. Let me know which ones you've gotten your noses on. Let me know which one you want to sample after watching this video. I'd like to find out. And if there any other fragrance you want me to review, let me know. Put a comment down so I can find out. But either way, guys, thanks so much for watching today's video. If you have any questions or comments, please list below. Please like this video. Please share it. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook, and I'll be back with more videos very soon. Have a good one. Goodbye. And if you didn't watch yesterday's video review on the new Brunello Cucinelli fragrances, there's a Pour Femme, this one right here, and a Pour Homme, this one right here. This is just a little update if you should buy these or not, or if you should wait for them at the discounters and things like that. First of all, I do have to say these are quite pricey at 180 euros, which I bought 100 ml. And they're also not beast mode, obviously, because it's a designer after all. I think the fragrances do fit the brand perfectly. I think the clientele who buys Brunello Cucinelli, you know, clothing will really be satisfied with these fragrances. But I felt like for the price point at 180 euros each, I think they'll probably be launched at around $200 here in the States when they come here. But for 180 euros each, I think it was overpriced for these fragrances. But as far as smells go, I really, really love them. My favorite of the two is the men's. but I feel like the woman's is totally pull-offable, but a man can totally pull off. And also you can intensify the two together by wearing them together. But the men's is about cypress with ginger, black pepper, clary sage, angelica. And then the woman's is pink pepper, precious woods, chestnut, orange blossom, bergamot, mandarin orange. I think they're both smelling great. For me, the men's is the men's actually has a bit more reach. It's a bit more has a bit more projection in comparison to the woman's. The woman's is very, very subdued, and I have tested this with a few folks, and I've asked. They both have gravitated towards enjoying the men's over the woman's because the woman's totally sits close to the skin. But if you want to find out more about it, you can go catch my review from yesterday. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.